I have a cat today because he won't shut up while I'm trying to record. What is on you? So he's gonna stay with me for a while. You might consider him to be a perfect addition to the crew. If you want to see more of him, just pause the video. Wipe just snot on me, that's gross. Enermax has a cool new kit on the water block, and he's got a fidget spinner. Okay, I'm done. So let's take this LIQFusion RGB 240mm AIO for a spin and see if it's hot stuff, or if it just leaves a bad taste in your mouth. We're not really going to lick it, probably. I think. Out of the box, you get the AIO itself, all the necessary mounting hardware, a manual, an RGB control stick thing powered via SATA, as well as an RGB splitter cable, thermal paste, a couple of RGB fans, and then a bunch of considerate items like a PWM fan splitter, an extension for the pump, Velcro straps, a Molex power adapter for your fans, extra coolant, and a power supply jumper if you want to check that you have a LIQFusion and not a LIQFusion. Enermax, you really know how to treat a guy. The mounting system is compatible with all relatively new and standard sockets, with the block sporting a single RGB cable and a typical copper base. From there, you get 400mm of sleeve tubing, a seemingly perplexed pump, and an aluminum radiator at the end. As metal as it sounds, we'll check back on how hardcore it actually is in a bit. The tubing isn't interfering with my relatively tall Corsair Vengeance RGB DIMMs, and it's moderately easy to move around if necessary. You've always got the Velcro to help you out in a pinch, which these tubes should not be doing. Mounting the block was easy on the hands, so let's move on to that slick RGB. The block has a neat design on it with a flow meter at the center. The two included RGB fans have diffusing rings, but unfortunately these do not extend through to the exhaust. It's not a huge deal since these should be slapped against a radiator anyway, but it would have been nice to have the option if I wanted to put these in pull or something. The fan frame sports rubber dampeners and is reasonably sturdy, giving me no further reason to complain. Out of the fan you get one 4-pin PWM cable and another for the RGB. They can be connected to the included splitter and plugged into your motherboard's RGB header for software control if you have the support for it. If you don't, worry not. You can plug it into the control box instead and putz around with the lighting effects from there. Pressing M will change this LED up top. If the LED is green, pressing up or down will cycle through the following effects. Rainbow, breathing or blinking depending on your speed setting in white, breathing or blinking depending on your speed setting in cyan, then in pink, yellow, blue, red, and green, then a color shift, breathing and cycling between the colors mentioned earlier, then blinking also between the aforementioned colors, a kind of covering marquee effect, a sort of wavy kind of effect, and some sort of colorful pinwheel. Then holding down the button for a couple of seconds will set the color back to its default rainbow. Pressing up for 3 seconds will set the controller to yellow, which will cycle through all of the effects. Once you see something you like, hit either up or down and the effect will be locked in, which will switch the controller back to green. Click on M again to enter speed mode, which will be indicated by a red LED. Well, that doesn't make sense, you're supposed to stop at a red light. Never mind. Here, the up and down buttons will adjust the effect speed, just in case you weren't sure. Hold M for a hot second to disable all lighting like a fuddy-duddy. Finally, onto the performance. Please note that the following data was extracted from testing done in my bedroom, which isn't a particularly controlled environment, so there is considerable room for error. Additionally, the figures shown aren't necessarily to say that one cooler is definitely better than the other, since you'll have to factor in a number of things including pricing, silence, performance, and form factor, and use that to figure out which is best for you. So, our first test pushes all coolers to max speed, doing their best to keep up with an incredibly abused i7-7700K. We see here that the LIQFusion cooler is more or less on par with the Deepcool Captain 240EX, but obviously beaten out by the Corsair H150i due to its longer length. If you tell me size doesn't matter, then boy do I have a chart for you. Equalizing the noise to 45 dBA, where the room typically sits at around 41, we see the LIQFusion cooler again pretty much back to the same as the Captain. And finally, if you want the quietest experience around, I'm happy to inform you that the pump is not audible to my ear or the microphone when the case is closed, and hardly noticeable even when it's opened. Upon first installing it, you may hear bubbles running through the loop, but those will resolve themselves in a short while. Running the fans at the lowest speed possible, we see temperatures skyrocket. And while the LIQFusion cooler does do better than the Captain here, it's likely due to the higher minimum RPM, but to its credit, it's pretty darn quiet. Speaking of which, have a listen. Oh. Now if we look at the pricing, the H150i clobbers you at $170 US. The Deepcool Captain 240EX sneaks in at a mild 100, and the LIQFusion cooler crawls in a bit higher at 120. The price you pay for RGB. But honestly, that's not too bad here for what you're getting. Remember, you can refill or replace the coolant, but you should refer to the manual. Looking at the RGB version of the Deepcool Captain cooler, you'll notice a $40 markup, so this isn't too shabby. And while I do consider this to be a fairly good price, there are still things that I don't think make a lick of sense. I already mentioned the lack of light on the exhaust end of the fan, but after that, I think the placement of the pump is kind of odd. To me, it stands out, and it could make routing the pump cable a little trickier, even though an extension is provided. The next thing looks to be an error in their marketing. Newegg and the user manual say the pump has a copper base, but this don't look like copper to me. It may be nickel plated, but I'm not sure. It's also possible that my sample isn't what a typical retail one would look like, so keep that in mind. Aside from that, the lighting in the pump does have some hot spotting, but it's hard to notice unless you're looking at it from its side, and I think it still looks generally pretty cool. Performance is satisfactory, I think the value is pretty well positioned, and RGB is pretty hard to deny in 2018. If this thing seems appealing to you, give the Enermax LIQFusion a LIQFusion. I don't know if that makes sense, but I haven't slept yet, so it's all I got. And so that's all I have to say about that. Like, dislike, comment, subscribe, share, leave me questions if you got them. Thanks for watching. My name is Steven, and I am ALittleDIMM. Bye-bye. Enermax has a cool new kit on the water block, and... Cat. Okay, I'm done. So let's take this LIQFusion RGB 240mm. Hey, damn it. You gotta stop drooling on me. This is much better with cats. The fan frame supports What are you looking at? Yellow? Blue? 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 Breathing and cycling between the... You can refill or replace the coolant, but you should refer to the manual. Ow, ow. Why are you wet? You'll notice a $40 markup, so this isn't too shabby. There are still things that I yeah, I think the placement of the pump is kind of odd. To me, it stands out, and it could... Oh, I'm in focus only in this spot. If you want to see him, this is the best you got. Shy.